Yesterday, the new Winter Classic jerseys were finally revealed, and I just say the new Winter Classics because technically this isn't the 2025 Winter Classic because it's not taking place on New Year's Day when it usually does. It's taking place on December 31st, 2024. So we have two Winter Classics in the same year. It's a bit odd. I wonder if this is like a transition year and they're going to start doing the Winter Classics on December 31st instead of January 1st. So this one's kind of just that odd man out, or if just for some reason they weren't able to do it on January 1st this year. I don't really know, but either way, it's the new Winter Classic jerseys in between the St. Louis Blues and the Chicago Blackhawks. So we've seen this matchup before. We've seen both of these teams have a lot of Winter Classics and outdoor games. So these jerseys, they're jerseys, man. They definitely are jerseys. So before we do go ahead and actually take a look at them, if you guys are new to the channel and you like hockey jersey content, please make sure to subscribe. I would really appreciate it. All right, let's take a look at them. Okay, so the first one that we're going to take a look at here is the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, we've known that this is going to be the jersey for, I think, like 3 months now. It was leaked quite a while back, but my opinions actually have changed a little bit on it. I was pretty high when I first saw this jersey, but it's not like I dislike it now, but I just don't love it as much as I did when I first saw it. I don't know if there's really a huge reason for that, and it's not like I dislike this jersey. Like, I still think it looks pretty good, but I'm not wowed by it. I'm not amazed by it. You know, you basically have that bottom stripe that's usually on the Chicago Blackhawks home jersey moved up just to the middle there in behind the logo, and it goes all the way across the arms. That I think looks pretty good. I don't mind that. That I probably would say is the best part of this jersey. Then with the logo itself, you know, it is just that roundo logo, but it's updated a little bit. It has the stars that are usually on the Chicago flag, as well as the new Chicago Blackhawks logo instead of the older school one that they would have used at the time. And while we're on the logo, we might as well take a closer look at it. So this is it close up, and it does look phenomenal. Like, it looks really, really nice. There's some chain stitching in there that we can see if we look at just the feathers, and that is how they usually are on the regular Chicago Blackhawks jerseys. But the fact that they have it on a logo that is this small is awesome. I really, really like that. You know, I'm honestly kind of surprised that they were able to do that still with this logo being just as tiny as it is, you know, encased in the roundel. But even like the stars are chain stitched and there's a lot of felt in there. It just looks really nice. Like, this logo, the way that it's made, I absolutely love it. I'm not a massive fan of the logo itself, but you know, I just usually don't like roundel logos, so that's kind of the main reason for it. But with the way that they actually produced the logo, I give it 2 thumbs up. They did a fantastic job there. Our next picture is just of the arm here, so we can see that there is the Winter Classic patch, which I have a better picture of a little bit later on that we'll look at. And we can see that the numbers are right above the stripes. That does look pretty good, just, you know, the cream color outlined in the black. It is felt, at least from what it looks like right there. There's no really huge patterns in the numbers on the arms, but there's a little bit of a pattern when we take a look at the back of the jersey. And then, of course, we have that secondary logo just right on the sleeves. And I have a better picture here, which, of course, the secondary patch, you know, no matter the way that it's colorized, it always looks fantastic. They always do a very good job with it. So, yeah, that looks awesome. This is the Winter Classic patch, so it's at Wrigley Field, which I believe is where they hosted the 2009 Winter Classic. So, yeah, in terms of the patch itself, I think, you know, it's not bad. At least for myself, it's nothing too crazy. I don't think it looks phenomenal, but it's also not a bad looking patch. It's definitely, I would say, middle of the road for Winter Classic patches, at least in my opinion. Then we can take a look at the back of the jersey here. Unfortunately, they didn't give us any real pictures of the back of the jersey, so I'm just using the kind of stock photo that they have on the NHL shop, and we can see that the stripe does not go all the way around to the back. A little bit unfortunate, but that's how it is on a lot of jerseys, honestly. They usually have the torso stripe just on the front and not on the back, which is not always my favorite. I would prefer if they do kind of wrap around the back. I really like when teams do that. But with the numbers, they do have that little bit of extra detail. You can see the stitching just kind of going all the way down, kind of almost like a striping pattern in a way. And I think that does look cool up close. I'm interested to see exactly how it looks on the jersey from a little bit farther away because, you know, like I said, we just have the stock photo and the stock photo doesn't show it all too well. So I'd like to see, you know, an actual view of the back of the jersey. Unfortunately, Chicago didn't provide any. Honestly, Chicago didn't really do a whole lot with releasing pictures. It was mostly the St. Louis side that actually released some pictures, so kind of unfortunate, but yeah, the numbers, I think that looks pretty good. And overall, you know, just as the jersey here, we can also see there's a little bit of detail inside the back of the collar, that hanger effect. It just says Chicago Blackhawks, and then it has the 4 stars, which, like I said earlier, are from that city flag. But yeah, overall with this Blackhawks jersey, I think they did a fairly good job. You they kind of took a little bit from their history and also revamped it and made it a little bit new, while still keeping that Winter Classic, that old school vibe to it. So overall, they did a pretty good job, I would say. I would give it like a 6.5 out of 10. Nothing amazing for myself, but it's not like it's bad. Not really one that I'm interested in buying. I think I would pass on this one. So let's go ahead and take a look at the St. Louis jerseys. So this is what the Blues jerseys look like, and yeah, they're not great. They really, really aren't, but I don't think I hate them as much as a lot of other people seem to. It does remind me a little bit of the New York Islanders Stadium Series jersey from last year, the 2024 Stadium Series jersey, but just a lot better, honestly. I think the colors on this jersey are really nice. I like that aspect of it, but it is just St. Louis colors, so it's not really anything too crazy, but it just looks good together, right? I like the St. Louis color scheme, and they are using that off-white or cream color as the main color of the jersey, and I'm just a sucker for that. I love cream and that off-white. I think it's just so much fun with jerseys, so I love when teams use it, which of course the Blackhawks jersey did as well, but when it's the main color, I tend to really, really like the jersey, so that definitely helps me out here a little bit for sure. And the other thing that I tend to like a lot in my jerseys is felt, which of course this St. Louis jersey does have in the logo and numbers. Same thing with the Blackhawks, but it's just a Winter Classic thing that basically all Winter Classic jerseys have is the felt, is the cream color, and I just really like that a lot. So it's hard for me to really dislike a Winter Classic jersey. This one does kind of get there, though. It gets pretty close. One thing that I will say that is usually a Winter Classic staple that is missing on both of these jerseys is the collar itself. So, of course, with this Winter Classic jersey that I'm wearing, this is the 2017 one. It has that kind of sweater type collar. They don't have that on these jerseys here, which is very, very unfortunate. It's not like it's on every single Winter Classic jersey, though. Like even a couple of the jerseys in the Adidas era, not every single Winter Classic jersey had that, but it is something that I do really, really like a lot. Although I didn't really love it in the Adidas era, I much preferred it in the Reebok era, but it's still kind of a little bit upsetting that they don't have it on either of these jerseys. But obviously the actual logo of the jersey, the word mark there, I am not a fan of. I don't like word marks in general. It also is a little bit weird because the Lewis is like all capitalized where, the Saint is not, and it just, I don't know, feels a little bit weird. It doesn't really look particularly great. So yeah, I don't love that logo at all. I think it's actually really, really bad. If they just had the St. Louis Blues logo on the front here, I think it would look a little bit better. Also, one thing that is slightly interesting is that in their kind of like little write-up that the NHL does when they release these jerseys, they said that it was based off the 1966 prototype jersey. But we already had a jersey that was based on that. That was the Reverse Retro 2.0 from the St. Louis Blues. And this one doesn't really feel like it's based on that one at all. I don't really get it. And so I was trying to understand it a little bit more, and I was kind of looking around, and I ended up finding a post from the St. Louis Blues subreddit. They had this picture right here, which looks pretty close to the actual jersey that we got. Apparently, this team is called the St. Louis Flyers. They were a team in the American Hockey Association from like the 1920s to the 1950s, and honestly, this is the only picture that I could find of them in this jersey. There were other pictures that I was looking at, but the team was in a different jersey. It had like stars up above, almost like the New York Americans from back in the day as well. Kind of like those jerseys. But yeah, at least to me, it looks like this is more of a nod to the St. Louis Flyers and those jerseys than the prototype jerseys, because I don't really see much of a connection with the prototype jerseys. At least, that's my opinion. I guess the font is, I wouldn't even say the font is somewhat similar either. I really don't know where they're getting that, but it's obviously the NHL releasing that information, so obviously that is what they pulled from. Doesn't really matter where it came from though. Not a fan of the logo for sure. Let's move on to our next photo, and we can see it's just a close-up image of the shoulder logo, which is just the St. Louis Blues, and that looks really nice. Chain stitched, felt. Obviously, very much enjoyed that. Then we can take a look at the back of the jersey and we can see that customization. I do like the customization. I think that looks nice. The font, I guess, is pretty similar to the font on the front, but I think it looks better, just as, the actual names, because I usually don't like word marks. And the numbers are pretty cool. I think that font, gives it that old-timey kind of feel to it, which works well in the Winter Classic. And then we have a close-up image of the numbers, so we have that blue felt on top of the yellow felt. That looks really nice, although it is wrinkled a little bit, which I just don't really understand why they would choose this image for a promotional picture if they knew that they were wrinkled. It does happen with felt. Sometimes it gets a little bit wrinkled. You can kind of iron it out a little bit, but in my experience, at least, it doesn't always come out perfectly, and, sometimes you kind of just have to live with it. So, like, yeah, maybe it's a little bit realistic, but I probably wouldn't use this as a promotional image. Like, either just take a closer-up picture of the top of the 5 there, or take another picture of another number, something like that. I just, it's not a great look, honestly, but it does happen to those felt numbers, so I guess they're just showing the reality of it a little bit more. And then our last picture is just, we can see inside the back of the collar like the Chicago one, they do have a hanger effect. That one just says St. Louis, and then it's the little fleur-de-lis right underneath it. So another cool hanger effect. Overall for St. Louis, even though I do think I like it a little bit more than most people, it's still not a very good jersey. So I think I would give it like a 3.5 out of 10. The colors are the only thing that really do it for me. I guess the customization as well. I do like the customization, but yeah, just the St. Louis word mark, I hate that. It's boring to me. I would much prefer an actual logo on the front of the jersey. So yeah, that really brings it down, and why I have it, at a 3.5 basically. And obviously this is not a jersey I'm going to buy. Not interested in this one. So yeah, those are the new Winter Classic jerseys. Overall, I would say that this is a pretty underwhelming Winter Classic. I don't think either of these jerseys are that fantastic. And I've seen some people say that this is the worst Winter Classic matchup that we've had in like a couple of years, which I would have to think about it. So maybe that's a video that I'll do in the future. But at least in my opinion, the main reason why that these jerseys are so underwhelming is just because we've had so many games with both of these teams in an outdoor game. With Chicago, this is their 7th outdoor game and 5th Winter Classic. With the St. Louis Blues, even though this is only their 3rd outdoor game and 3rd Winter Classic, it's their 3rd Winter Classic in the past, I guess, 8 years, if you want to say that this is the 2025 Winter Classic, because their first Winter Classic was in 2017. So it just feels like both of these teams have had a ton of outdoor games, and at this point, it's like, we just want some new teams. At least that's the way that I feel, and I think a lot of people do the same. So honestly, I hope that we don't see the Blues or the Hawks in another outdoor game for like at least another 5 years. I know that's not going to happen because the NHL loves giving the Blackhawks outdoor games because they sell a lot, right? They have a lot of fans, and a lot of fans love going to it. They probably make a ton of money off of Blackhawks fans going to those outdoor games, and I get that. That's understandable, but just as a jersey collector and wanting to see new teams in the Winter Classic, it's a little bit disappointing. But anyways, those are just my opinions on these new jerseys here. Let me know yours in the comments down below. Which jersey do you like more? I'd love to hear it, but that is going to do it for me. If you like the video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, follow me on all my social medias, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.